Dear brothers, good morning, fellas. So, there is something that has been on the forefront of my mind recently, and something that I've read about in the past and believe wholeheartedly that matters immensely when it comes to ministering to other men, but especially for those of you with kids, ministering to your kids and bringing knowledge to your children. And there is an old G.K. Chesterton quote. So G.K. Chesterton was a awesome literary stud from the early 1900s who's written a lot of stuff that is just really quite brilliant. And so he had this idea that he wrote about in his book called Tremendous Trifles, which is awesome. But I'm going to quote it verbatim. So he says, "Fairy tales, then, are not responsible for producing in children fear or any of the shapes of fear. Fairy tales do not give the child the idea of the evil or the ugly that is in the child already, because it is in the world already. Fairy tales do not give the child his first idea of bogey. What fairy tales give the child is his first clear idea of the possible defeat of bogey. The baby has known the dragon intimately ever since he had an imagination. What the fairy tale provides for him is a St. George to kill the dragon." And so that is actually the original quote. But what often you hear is the following, which was Neil Gaiman wrote this. And it was kind of a paraphrased version that says, "Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten." So why do I think that that is important for all of you to hear this morning? Your kids, the men that you're associated with, all of those people are looking for some form of hope in a world that seems bereft of it. And one of the problems we face is that too many young people, too many young men, and young women for that matter, are growing up with this notion that all of these difficulties are unbeatable. They're not survivable. And that's one of the beauties of literature, especially old literature before we had the advent of social media and the internet and what have you, is that literature gave people the ability to see that even amidst hopelessness and darkness and severe suffering, there was always the opportunity that goodness would prevail. And, I think about probably my favorite series of all time, Lord of the Rings. We think about, the third book there, Return of the King, and, Frodo and Sam are getting close to Mount Doom, and literally all seems lost. Aragorn takes the meager army they have and they go right to the doors of Mordor, and it's a losing battle until somehow, some way, hope is found. And there's some terrific quotes in there about how you can survive. And I think that it's very important that stories like that are taught to your children, are taught to young men. And they don't necessarily have to be fairy tales. They don't have to be, Lord of the Rings or the Harry Potters of the world. They can be your story. And what I mean by that is most of you listening to this at some point have gone through something that was extremely difficult. You have gone through trials and tribulations. You have faced many different dragons across your life, be it with family members being sick, be it with a sickness that you yourself suffered, be it a financial crisis in your family's life. Whatever it may be, you have faced things that felt like they were going to push you off the edge. You faced situations that you were almost certain you were not going to make it through. And yet here you are listening to this, being someone who survived those situations. So my encouragement to all of you guys this morning is make sure that your loved ones, especially the younger loved ones of yours or your children, to that end, friends of yours that are struggling with anxiety or feelings of depression or just kind of downtroddenness, make sure that they know that dragons can be slain. The difficulties in your life can be slain. We all know that they exist because all of us feel it in some capacity. I agree wholeheartedly with Chesterton in the sense that children are well aware that there is evil in the world because it's inbuilt. We're not built good, if you will. We're built with a proclivity for sin, if you want to get biblical about it. However, what matters is not that it's the ability that terrible things exist as possible. It's far more important that we're aware that those things can be overcome completely. I'll pull back another G.K. Chesterton quote. And he says, "The one perfectly divine thing, the one glimpse of God's paradise given on earth, is to fight a losing battle and not lose it." That needs to be brought to every child, every friend, every mentee, everyone that you are around should have the sensation that even if it feels like you are losing a battle, you are fighting a losing uphill battle, and somehow you find a way to win it, that is actually a possibility, that's a real existence. Because for most people, especially today, the minute that life becomes difficult, they don't see a way through that smoke. They do not see a way out of that burning house. And that is where men need to step up and provide them the examples of how they made it through their own fires, how they fought their own dragons. And Jordan Peterson has talked about this certainly at length, about finding a dragon, slaying it. You know, he's used the examples of maybe you struggle with public speaking and you want to get better at it. That's a dragon to slay. Maybe you're trying to lose some weight. That's a dragon to slay. Maybe you're trying to improve your relationship with your spouse. That's a dragon. Maybe you're trying to improve your stance at work. Whatever it ends up being, all of us have faced some kind of dragon in our lives. And our children and our friends, especially those that we're mentoring, need to hear your stories because they're real to them. Literature gives us that fantasy version of it. The ethics and morals of it are accurate, but it's a make-believe story. It's a fairy tale. But your stories are not fairy tales. They are concrete, hard examples of someone who made it through severe, severe suffering. And so I want you to think on that as you kind of move forward this week. Let your stories be known to those around you, especially the ones where you fought the dragon and you slayed it, because that teaches the next group of people that they can survive anything in the face of absolute danger and chaos. I'm going to leave it at that today, boys. I love you all. God bless. Be strong. Go teach the world how to slay their dragons. We'll see you, boys.